George Global anywhere?
You're on live.
Okay. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of Focus on Liberia, the marketplace, where we talk business, we talk money, and we talk all things that has to do with the economic of Liberia, moving it forward and so forth. As you know, this is Focus on Liberia. We strive to educate, elevate, and promote all things Liberia. I'm being joined by my co-host, Gabriel Tagpito Carter, who has been holding on the fort while a lot of other co-hosts and hosts, such as myself and Alex, have been nursing some wounds or nursing certain things to come back stronger. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, this is FOL, the marketplace, and I'm not Dennis Ja. How are you doing today?
Hey, welcome back, my man. It's good to see you again consistently. 2 days, 2 weeks in a row. That's good.
Yeah,
I'll keep
yeah, man.
counting.
Yeah, you know what? You should keep it going because next week I will not be here, but consistently the following week,
Yeah, yeah,
I'm gonna be there, my man. Don't put the pressure on, but I will be here.
yeah,
We'll
yeah,
be
yeah,
here.
yeah.
Let's get into it, man. You know what, Gabriel? We're gonna have like a little conversation today. Alex, I know you're there. Just real quick, guys. Those who tuning in, the topic today is competing for every dollar regionally post-election. Competing for every dollar regionally post-election. When I
Yep.
saw this on the schedule and I was looking at it and thinking about it, I got kind of excited about it because I said, man, what is Gabriel thinking about this subject and what does it really mean to be
Yeah.
competing for every dollar regionally as Liberia, where we are, small West African country in the middle of West Africa.
Yeah.
So, without further ado, hey, let's get it straight into it. Give me a little context, Gabriel. What is competing for every dollar regionally post election? What are you trying to get to?
Yeah. But before we jump into that, let's welcome Alex back. I think he's in the background. Alex too
Okay.
has been away for a little bit, and it's good to have him on, even though he cannot be on live. But I think he's in the background. Alex, I think we can hear you. Go ahead.
Thank you,
How are
thank you
you?
for. I mean, I'm trying. I'm recovering, and I'm trying. So,
Yeah.
from actually, it's been from one roller coaster to another, from the busy season the tax season, the consulting season, and all that.
Yeah.
Then I got a medical situation I had to take care of,
Yeah.
and then I'm recovering. So, but
Yeah.
it's good to be on the show today. Even though I'm in the background, but it's good to be in the show.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No,
Thank you,
it's
brother.
good. It's good to have you guys back, and it's good to hear you back. It's good to hear that you're recovering as well. Like you said, roller coaster is part of life. It's part of what we do. You're not going through a roller coaster. That means you're not in life. That means you're somewhere else. So being in that roller coaster, that means at least you're scared. Sometimes you're scared. Sometimes you feel like you're gonna fall out the roller coaster. Sometimes you feel like. But that's
Part
part of
of,
life. So.
part of the roller coaster, looking for aim, man. Looking for bar.
Yeah, but that's part of life. So it's good to have you back. To
Thank you.
jump into this, and to the viewers wherever you are, thank you for joining us. Again, as we always say, take the time, share the show, bring your questions, bring your comments, opinions, perspectives, more importantly, and let's have a discussion. The topic, as William pointed out, is competing for every dollar post election. I know you hear some of us make noise on social media about this upcoming election, or even the next one, or the one before, or even the one before the before one. Um, at the end of the day, is I think every candidate vying for the presidency or vying to be a senator, a representative, at the end of the day, at least from my perspective, and I think this is all we should all hold them out to be, is for them to do something for the county, do something for the country to bring that country or county a little better than they left it. Uh, in our case, as I said, we want to look at it from a national perspective, so it will be the country as a whole. Um, but at the end of the day, everyone wants to bring some kind of development to the country. And how do you do that? By different initiatives. But from this standpoint, we want to look at it as to how do we compete for every dollar after this election. When I mean compete for a dollar after the election, I mean we're strategically located as a country, specifically where we are. We're smack right in the middle of three other countries or four other countries around us, right? So it makes it's unique and it's tough at the same time. It's unique in a way that we have the ocean there, we can leverage it. It's tough in the sense that the guys that are around us, like the Ghana, the Ivory Coast, the Sierra Leone, the Guinea, all of those people have a little bit of edge above us, right? So, from my standpoint, from what we want to talk about today is, hey, it doesn't matter who's in the room. It doesn't matter. They said to be the best, you challenge the best. To be the best, you compete with the best. So in this case, is that how do we compete with those guys? After this election, how do we compete with them? Where every dollar, whether we're looking at it from a foreign direct investment or we're looking at it from, yeah, pretty much from a foreign direct investment or even from an international partners or any way you want to look at it, how do we compete to bring investment in our country? So for me, I think this is what I want us to look at today. And how do we set ourselves up to do that? To make sure that we don't just go raise our hand, hey, look at me, look at me, look at me. But somebody from the outside will say, hey, look at what those guys are doing over there. I think this is a good environment to bring capital in to make a good return on. So that's exactly what it is. And I know there's a lot to talk about, but I think from a introductory standpoint, that's what I want us to talk about. That's what we're going to talk about today.
Thank you. Let's look at the first one. Let's talk about the diaspora. How do we capitalize on diaspora? Um, how do we do that? Because the diaspora, there's a passion, there's a homeland, there's a desire, whether it's people are going after them strongly or not. So
Yeah.
tell me, what are some low hanging fruits? Something we can do.
Yeah, but
The,
William. Before you go into that,
yeah.
before we go into that specific, let me add something to what the context that Gabriel laid out just now. In addition to that context,
Yeah.
competing for every dollar. You talk about foreign direct investment. Yes, all these countries, neighboring countries, and everybody competing for economic dollars. So, say for example, when we had our situation, I did some job on the investing in Liberia, the business climate. We saw that a lot of companies left Liberia,
Yep.
manufacturing company and stuff like that left Liberia to go to neighboring countries, including Ivory Coast and Ghana especially. But today, on the flip side, that is happening to Ghana. Listening to a speech given by one of the guy who is supporting the opposition, complaining that because of the situation in Ghana today, a lot of the companies in Ghana are leaving for Ghana and going to Ivory Coast.
Yep.
So the question is, what is Ivory Coast doing good that Ghana is not doing? Of course, because of Ghana's economic issues with the inflation and stuff like that.
Yep.
Then you come to even tourism.
Yeah.
A lot of things that Ghana, they took from our plate. The return of the black people and stuff like that, and people pouring into Ghana and here they're making what $3 billion annually out of
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
what can countries do differently? Recently, I listened to a speech also given by the Kenyan president, where he said the African Union should have been doing this, but he is opening up his country and relaxing visa restriction on every African Union member to
Yeah.
come freely into the country and contribute. And that is a way to attract investment as well. Of course,
Right.
there will be the bad people will be coming as well, but of course, I'm sure they will have a way to weed those people out. So yes, the topic is great. Competing for every dollar,
Yeah.
whether it's in the sub-region, whether it's in Africa as a whole, or whether the topic that William just introduced, how do we get the diaspora dollars? Yeah. So it's a great topic.
Well, Alex, we want to flow with you because one of the things you mentioned is on our list, the visa. So share a little bit more about visa, maybe a couple of sentences on how we could maybe tweak our visa policy in competing with some of our neighbors, or how that would be financially good for us.
So some of the things whether it's at the ECOWAS level or at the African Union level, they've been calling for ease of trade. Like it says just in Africa in ECOWAS, we're talking about ease of trade, that we could trade with each other. West Africa has the context is that West Africa right now has you don't need a visa to go to any West African country, right? But how do you apply that throughout Africa, throughout the membership of the African Union, that people can move about freely, like the way they do in the Schengen countries in Europe, where they move around easily. That way encourage the movement of goods. That way encourage for countries to compete for the dollars equally. Visa restrictions, releasing visa restriction, meaning that countries are not required to have visa. Once you have a passport of an African nation, you can freely travel to another African country, especially when you are trading.
Okay, thank you, Gabriel. Any other angle from the visa side that you would like to add about waiving visa fees or e-visas?
No, I think if I may add, I think the whole what do we call it? What Africa is doing something unique with their visa compared to other African countries, at least compared to us, right? Our visa to apply for visa to go to Liberia, I think it's $160, right? 150, $160. Where Ivory Coast, they took that online, and you can do that online.
Right.
By the way, they took that online. You don't have to go into anybody's office. You apply online, and it's cheaper. I think it's 120. But if you do it through, they have an agency you can use. You do it through them. You add, I think they charge you $20, so it comes out to about, I think total cost was 120, 135, right? They do it online. They don't issue anything. They just give you a receipt that you get your visa on arrival in Ivory Coast, right? It's cheaper, it's online, and you don't have to go through anybody or here to be keep sending stuff. You apply for it online, you send your passport, you send your ticket, but they're very strict to a level because they ask for your the place you're going to stay, who you're going to stay with, a phone number, and all of that, which is kind of from a security standpoint that is very stringent. And I, you know, maybe we could do something like that, right? And we could do something like that. Maybe that's something we could, well, one of these candidates can talk about doing an e-visa. But I think that's the only thing I can talk about. And in terms of intercontinental, why I think this is something the Free Trade Africa is all about, which is to allow people to move within the continent freely. We have that in Europe. Europe, you have a European visa. You don't have to get visa here and there. You have a passport, you don't have to get visa here and there to move. You can travel
Mhm.
freely. This is why you can go to England, take a train from there and go to France and do all of these things, right? With
Mhm.
nobody bothering you at all. It's easy, it's free, it improves trade, intercontinental trade, and mobility, right? So let's say if you have that, if we had that, if the roads were good, you can say I don't want to, live in Sierra Leone. I can live in Liberia and be easily travel without anybody bothering me. Get on the highway and drive to Sierra Leone, or from Sierra Leone to Liberia, or vice versa.
Right.
But without that, I travel I will say that quickly and we can get on to the next one. I traveled from Liberia to Sierra Leone. I drove on the road, right? You
Mhm.
get to Water side, they will check you on the Liberian side, and then you get on the Sierra Leone side, they will check you as well, right? And these guys at every checkpoint, they will take money from you, right?
Mhm.
Like you would say in our case, the sun was hot. You would sit in a hot sun because they don't even have a good uh what do you call it? Immigration place there to call it. So you sit in a house and they would take your visa, they go in the bag, they come back, they would just hold on to it and make sure that you give them something before you leave. All of that could be eliminated, my man. And when you eliminate that, people will travel freely, more people will move around freely. Yeah.
Got it.
And
It's a
let me
more.
just let me just add that yes, some of the embassies, Liberian embassy also have the online version of applying for your visas as well. So I remember, for example, somebody traveled, somebody was traveling to Ghana. Yes, they got the visa online. They just submitted the passport. So you're doing the same thing in Liberia. They have it also. You can do it online. You don't have to go there. But they also have the regional areas. Like for example, they have the consulate general in Minnesota, where it serves Minnesota, North Dakota. Even though there's another argument right now as to why this is happening, but that is not what I want to go into. But the idea that yes, they have the ability, Liberia embassies have the ability for people to apply for visas online. I just wanted to make that point.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And to just buttress some of the things that you both mentioned, Senegal has it's visa free upon arrival. You just be there 60 days. Sorry, 90 days. You have to have a passport that is valid over 6 months. So that's a country in our region. But we're kind of looking at this and say, yeah, visa is definitely one stop to compete. Let's look at something else. Um, savings. There are a couple of banks in Nigeria that gives you a little premium for diaspora savings. There are banks in India that do the same. Is that a space where Liberia can touch on? Is that realistic?
Yeah, and I think some banks do have that kind of maybe that will actually give a segue into the diaspora play here. So some banks do have uh, a savings account that targets the diaspora. I know I follow EcoBank, um, a lot, and they do have uh, programs. They have savings account products specifically that target the diaspora as well.
Mhm.
I know LBDI does have I think an account like that, but I think having an account like that, that seem as if it targets the diaspora, and doing something aggressively to target the diaspora for them to bring their capital home are two different things, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
as I always like to say, despite the perspective that most people have out there, where the Decemberies or the people go back during tax season or they wait till December to go back, not a lot of Liberian people have that kind of like 200,000 or 500,000 or $1 million sitting in their bank account, right? To say
Mm-hmm.
they can just go at one time and throw it in there, and do something with it, or build a house or invest in a business. And maybe this actually it goes into another topic in terms of you know capitalizing, right? And I think having a product like that, like a savings account that targets them, you got to be aggressive in terms of how you court them. Once marketed to make sure that, hey, people want to make sure that if I put my money here, it is a safe place. Over here we put our money in the bank, we know it's backed by uh, deposit insurance, right? You put your money in Liberia in a accounts bank account there. You want to make sure that you're putting it in a very sound institution. One, two, you want to make sure you put it in an institution that gives you good service. You don't want to go take money out and say today we don't have money. You can come back. You don't. So if these institutions, these financial institutions are able to, if one can look at those challenges, little challenges that diaspora people have, and be able to fix it, they put themselves apart into a different uh,
Mm-hmm.
sector in terms of competing. They set themselves apart from the other financial institution. Like we always say in banking, right? You sell the same thing that everybody's selling, which is money. The only thing that differentiates you from your competitor is the service you provide. If not, they can go here and then the same service you're offering, the same product you're offering, they can go get it somewhere else. You look at your niche, you capitalize on the niche. You look at what your competitor is complaining about, or the customers complaining about, you fix it to set yourself apart. But I think the whole savings part of it could be a bigger play if banks are able to compete. They're able to recognize that diaspora have a little bit of money that they're able to bring home, and they want to bring that money home to do certain things with it. This is how we can help them. These are the strategies we want to deploy
Mm-hmm.
to help them bring that money home, but also help them start businesses, build houses,
Correct.
or even retire. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Can't retire. I just gonna cash my 401k or whatever it is. Can put it in your bank. I get a little bit of money from there every month. Send a delegation here to, you know, um, do town halls to these different diaspora communities, and let them talk about your banks, and see what you're doing to play to the diaspora strength in the diaspora.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
Alex, do you think that this is a pie in the sky, or do you think it's very, very reachable, attainable?
Yeah, I think it's attainable. Say for example, in my personal experience, as I left Liberia, I had an account at the bank. I don't want to be specific with the bank, but when I left Liberia, when I came back to the US, I mean, I could access my ATM card every time I came to the US, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
Up to, of course, the maximum that is allowed, the daily maximum for withdrawal. It was easy. I had my account online. I could review my account online, and then when I came back, I could transact business. I mean, say when I want to give people money in Liberia, I could just
Mm-hmm.
transact that from the US. But I have lost that ability, right? So I'm doing projects in Liberia, whether it's consulting project or construction project. How do I transfer my money easily without, I don't know whether that has changed, but personally, I'm having that challenge even with the bank that I have my account at. So, and whether they are reaching out properly, like what you were saying, whether they're reaching out to the diaspora to kind of source the money. Another area could be even, and that started in when I was in Ghana. That started like I left Ghana more than 20 years ago, right? So that even with the mortgage financing, how the diaspora mortgage financing and stuff like that, how people in the diaspora who access, buying homes and get, home.
Right.
So the financial institutions are tapping into the diaspora Liberians in investing in homes. We hear all these stories where people sending tens of $1,000s to their relatives, and they don't, they don't have the best outcome. People stealing their money and stuff like that. How do the bank access these people directly? Looking at even the fees, because sometimes the fees are so high. You want to do a wire transfer, it's so high. All these things. It's part of competing for the dollars, because places like Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, they're way, Ivory Coast, they're way step ahead of us in terms of tapping into the diaspora and the money that all countries are competing for.
Okay. Thank you. Larry Kennedy has just joined us. Larry, thank you for joining us. It's always appreciative. We know the schedule is hectic and so forth. We won't waste too much time with the introduction. Everyone knows who you are. What we're looking at, Professor Larry, is what are some low-hanging fruits competing for every dollar regionally? And we look specifically now, we're in the banking sector. Are there a few little minuscule opportunities that is readily available that should be, I guess, optimized? Thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I was listening to you guys earlier, and Gabriel, thanks so much for holding down the fort. I know the team has been extremely busy, and I'm glad William was able to join you as well. But here's the thing, right? No country has ever developed without having a strong financial system. I don't care how you cut it, you need a strong financial system. And every financial system, you need several important things. One important thing in the financial system, you need very good regulations. It has to be effectively regulated, because people would take advantage of the system. If you don't have a system regulated, we see here in the US, even in the US with all the regulation, we can go back in history and we can see people like the Michael Milken that took advantage of the system, with the junk bonds. We can start back in the 80s. We can look at the Ivan Boyski. We can even look at the guy, who was the guy from the New York Stock Exchange, who ran one of the largest Ponzi schemes of all time in the U.S.
His last name was Ponzi, right?
Madoff.
I forgot his first name.
Bernie Madoff.
Bernie Madoff.
You talking about Madoff?
Highly respected guy. Right. Highly respected guy, ran a Ponzi scheme.
Right.
So you can't have a financial sector like in Africa, in Liberia, the region, that you don't have very good regulations. Because the only way a country will develop, one of the ways that countries develop, and when I'm talking development, not like 1-2% growth, like the 4-5-6% growth, like we see sometimes in Ethiopia and other places, like even Guinea post Ebola, right? What you need is a financial system that people can trust. Meaning, we have a contract, Gabriel. If I put my money in your bank on Broad Street, we have an agreement that whenever I need my money, it should be made available to me. But William, do we have that situation in Liberia where money, if I put 10,000 in the bank today, can I come 10,000 cash? Can I come back tomorrow and pull out 10,000 cash? I'm hearing sometimes it doesn't happen that way. Oh, Dualu and the people. Glad you're here, bro. So because what happens with the financial system, you have to take money from people who are saving it, and you have to move it over to people who want to invest it. But at the same time, when those savers want the money, you have to be able to tap it and bring it back. That's why at the end of the stock market collapse back in the 30s here in the US, the FDIC was formed to put some credibility back into the system. But in Liberia, no one can tell me that LBDI is not, I don't think they have enough liquidity. If LBDI had a run on the bank, if everybody went to LBDI for their money, LBDI doesn't have that kind of money. Because why? They have been lending money to friends and family. You heard McGill took out a loan when they first came to power, like $250,000, $300,000. You think he paid back that money? They've been lending money to friends and family. And that money is other people's money.
Yeah.
You know, so the banking system in Liberia, you need to build trust in it. That means you need a very good central bank that can regulate the system, but you're not going to really develop the system. And I'll swing it over to my man
Well, Professor Larry, you mentioned something important, and I want to kind of stay there for a little second, and I want Dualu to chime in as well. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome, Dualu. Thank you for joining us. So much energy is always appreciative all the time. Do you think we're closer to? Are we close or far from getting to that point? Is that something that we're close to it, or looking at the horizon, it might take a while?
Look,
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dualu. Go ahead, buddy.
Yeah, guys. Hey, thank you, man, for having me join the conversation this afternoon. Look, I listened to Larry. I was listening to the show. I was actually coming out of the driveway. I said, well, let me run in there real quickly and join these guys. But it goes back to having the institutional structures to support what we are trying to do. What we refuse to do in the country. Look, last night on the show, I believe it was on the closing argument, and I made this argument. Look, the issue of leadership is not a child's play thing. I know we can have all the bickering aside, but we have to build the institutions, and it take technocrats to build that institutions to withstand the shocks that we are going to absorb if we're going to be able to have the banks to support the small businesses in the country, to create the businesses in the country. The platform's already there. We're not reinventing the wheel here, gentlemen. Everything is already out there. So the issue here is, are people willing to truly have the people who know what to do to come in and do this? It's not about book. I'm not talking about book here. I'm talking about people with hands-on experience that can come into the country and build a platform that we can catapult the entire system. That's where I think is lacking the leadership and the institutional structure to be built upon.
Thank you. Professor Larry, go ahead.
You're muted, Larry. You wanted to add something to that.
Yeah, like what my man Dualu is saying. Look at the number of non-performing loans in the country. It tells you that we're really far apart. When you look at this sanction on McGill, in that sanction on McGill, on the U.S. Department, on the OFAC, the Office, the Treasury and Office of Foreign Asset Control, the OFAC website, when you read the sanction on McGill, he was, and this is what a lot of people suspected, he was actually selling high-level ministerial positions within the government. Mm-hmm. And it is alleged that the central bank governor actually purchased that position from McGill, because technically he really doesn't have the expertise. Yeah, Dualu, right? He doesn't. No. What is his background? Public policy or something like that? So
compliance officer.
Compliance officer
for the governor.
We are far away because he doesn't understand the regulatory part of banking, right? Mm-hmm. Because if I need to borrow money, and a lot of the businesses in America, the small businesses, they actually borrow money in order to grow their business. So I need to be able to go to the bank, borrow that money, but that money you're taking is not manufactured money. It's somebody that deposited that money in there. But there has to be a mechanism in place that will force borrowers to pay that money back.
Yep.
Back in 2013, I can never forget this. Madam Sirleaf, during her annual message, she was threatening people to pay back money that they were borrowing.
Right.
Correct.
10 years later, the data shows that it's even worse. The non-performing loans, and you all know, you saw it on social media where people were repaying their loans. The guy who they hired, who his resume didn't match what was said about him. It turns out that I don't know if that he did it or someone did it, but it leaked out a list that showed a whole lot of people who weren't paying back a lot of these loans.
Yeah.
If I go to IB Bank and I check the background, is IB Bank actually, are they liquid? Are they able to pay back depositors money? So I think, William, to answer your question, I don't think we're there yet because we don't have that kind of commercial court to book people. The number of non-performing loans should be under 10% is really high. I think the last time I checked, it was 20-something%. So, William, to answer your question, I don't think we're there right now.
Yeah.
But we need to be there in order to grow the economy.
Yeah. If I may add to that, I think there's this argument that I usually have with people that in as much that where we want to take Liberia as a country, or at least what we aspire it to be, um, you can bring any president. It could be even the great Lee Kuan Yew and put him in there. If you don't build you don't solve, if no president is able to solve that, their financial system. I think Larry mentioned that. Well, you can't take that anywhere. And the problem that we have is easily solvable. It's like we said, the guy that is in place, if he did come indeed from a compliance background, he should have been the one to solve it. What do I mean by that? We have non-performing loan problem, as Larry said, right? Which is one of it has existed even Ellen time, or even before Ellen time. It existed during her time, and it continued to even be worse right now. From a compliance standpoint in the banking sector or any bank, we have what we call exposure. Exposure meaning this is why the banks are regulated by the OCC, the FDIC, and the Federal Reserve, right? Meaning that if you are exposed to the construction service sector to a certain degree, they can come in and say, hey, you have too much exposure here. You got to stop lending to that sector and grow the other sector, because they don't want you to get too exposed to that sector to the point that something happens to that sector, it threatens your liquidity. Now, why do I say that? If we had this problem with non-performing loan, our own is very simple. Most of the banks in Liberia, they lend to people that work in the government, right?
Correct.
Or people that are in the service sector, or some people that are just with a little bit of money. The problem of lending to mostly everybody going after people that are in the government, meaning that if we know the problem with the government, the moment the government starts paying people 2-3 months, what happened? Those people take out loan for the government, they can't pay you back. All of a sudden, because you're too exposed to that sector of people, your bank now start having liquidity problem. It becomes a majority of its lending books not performing, meaning that because the government, sometimes they go 3 months, 6 months. I hear people say up to a year where they're just working, they're not getting paid, right? From a compliance standpoint, you can regulate the books, the banks, where you can look at their books and see where they're exposed to, and you're able to tell them, hey, you got to not be too exposed to people in the government. Look to diversify in other sectors like the real estate, the law, the agriculture, the consumer loan, the mortgages. Like you're able to enforce that and make sure the banks follow that by just doing your job, especially for somebody who comes from a compliant background, right? And as I said, as long we are able to do that, we're not able to do that, we cannot go anywhere. We'll continue to have the non-performing loan problem, and the non-performing loan problem, the liquidity is going to cause liquidity problem, and we're going to be in this role like we're here right now, continuing to make this argument again as to where we ought to be and where we're not. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Gabriel.
Okay, let me ask Gabriel a question. Gabriel, did I say when you bring Lee Kuan Yew to Liberia, will not solve the problem?
The structure we have, you put him in there, that means he will have to do a sweep. He will sweep. What I mean, he will sweep in order to get what he needs to get done. Because if you look at what he did in the structure that he had in Singapore, it's not what we had, So unless if that structure exists as it is,
so when you bring Paul Kagame to Liberia, we'll not have
in our structure. Not who Paul Kagame is. Who Paul Kagame is, we'll never have somebody like that in Liberia.
It's the people, it's the leader that dictate the actions.
Right.
Yeah, we have structures in Liberia, but the structures are not being adhered to because we have the structures are not being imposed or improved upon if we have problems because we have leadership issues.
You're right.
We have leadership acting. We don't have the Paul Kagame and we don't have the Lee Kuan Yew. We don't have the Gabriel type of people to lead the people in the right direction.
Right.
Correct. So
I agree with you.
So when I have this topic, it seems like competing for every dollar regionally, it seems like we're doing a good job because we're getting the NGO money. That's the same we're seeing. It seems to be we are a platform in Liberia where it's just readily available. Thoughts, Dualu? Is that what we're
I want to say this. This is something, and I believe it's a disconnect in Liberia. It's hard to notice. In most developing countries that are serious about governance, there is a continuous push between the government and the local banks to get the same result. Let me explain it this way. The banks in the community, they are somehow subsidized in some fashion by the sitting government in order to get results locally. That means they can enhance local businesses. In Liberia, it seems like the banks and the government are not working together to get the same results. Everybody is going by their own agenda. Now, you spoke about the compliance issue. It depends what level of compliance he was doing. At what level will be able to determine whether he can actually do that. But let me say this. There are banks in Liberia. We are going around in the communities, for example, and if they see Mr. King doing the project, and for some reason they believe they can get some profit through that project, they will lend Mr. King some money, not with the expectation that Mr. King is going to repay, but with the expectation that they will take over Mr. King's property and sell it. So they're trying to make business in another way that's actually diminishing the community, not advancing the community. Now, there is no cash in between where the government can come in and say, listen, our agenda here is to empower the community through the banks. Is the government adequately doing that? In fact, I think until 2 years ago, the government itself was literally borrowing from the bank and not even repaying the banks. So the banks are actually breaking apart. Most of the banks, in fact, since 2017, close to 70% of the banks across the country have literally closed down from in the, not Monrovia, but other parts of the country, because there is no more extension in this location. So the banks are not working the way banks should work. So there is a massive disconnect. And how do we get the reconnection back? Because without the banks, the local communities in Ganta, in Zwedru, or in Buchanan cannot grow. Now, here's another thing that's happening in the country. Mr. King is giving a loan for $5,000. This is a substantial amount of money in Liberia. Huge amount of money in Liberia. What happens is, within 30 days, the banks is giving you 25% interest, and they expect you to start repayment in 30 days. There is no freaking way you can even turn that money around to begin making some profit in 30 days. Now, I'm not saying the bank should just allow the money to sit there, but this is where the government come in. What role is the government playing to make sure these banks are successful by making sure people are able to repay this money back? My issue is, find this connection and let's build a community. Because if the community is built, the banks are going to be strengthened. And by extension, obviously, the government itself is going to be strengthened. Mr. King.
No, you are correct. Because I think one of the things we're trying to look at is, hey, Dualu, put yourself in 2024, January 2024, right? We've looked at governance, right? We said, hey, we got to establish governance, right? And we want to look at certain things that are realistic, right? So if I come to you and say, hey, you know what, Liberia, we have a lot of land. We can put a nuclear power plant. We can provide power to so many people. We can build like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 dams, right? I mean, those are, we're trying to come down to some really low hanging fruit. And thanks for joining us. Want to look at, let's talk about healthcare. Are there any things healthcare wise that we can look at that are low hanging fruits that we should be able to really do? I'm not talking about build a big hospital, but are there certain things we can do in that space?
Well, what I'm going to say to that is, when you're talking about healthcare, you're talking about on the national level and how you link it up with a bank, or just looking at healthcare separately. I just want to be absolutely clear.
Definitely. Well, I'm actually looking at it from the Liberia context and seeing how is there anything small in this space that you can say, hey guys, realistically we can really do this. And
there's a lot of things that can be done. Like William, if you went to Liberia, what happens to Liberia is less than 10% of our land is being utilized for what you would consider development. So most of our towns and villages are literally concentrated in major hubs. So for instance, I will give you Banga, I will give you Buchanan, I will give you Vonjima, Ganta. Everybody knows the populated centers, right? So our entire land mass, less than 10% is being utilized for any given reason, whether it's agriculture, etc. So we are underutilized. Let's lay that foundation. If you are going to target healthcare facilities, they have to be targeted in the major hubs. Now, I had an argument, and there's a paper that I wrote, and I divided Liberia into 5 zones, right? These are the 5 zones. We have to decentralize zonally, if that's a word. We have to decentralize in a way. Say for in the Southeast, you create a Southeastern capital city, so to speak, right? And then you can concentrate most of the health sector in that area, where everybody from Sano, from Grand G, from Maryland, there's a central location. Go to your capital city or major hub. So if we don't decentralize in that way, we'll be wasting money. So what happened is, under Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, it appeared like a great idea, but when you look at the idea, we were wasting money. Ellen built a lot of clinics across the country. Most of these clinics have been defunded under President Weah administration because the intent was these clinics were not being built to provide health services. These clinics were being built for political reasons. To say, oh, ANC will build clinic in your district, you'll vote for me. And this is not how we push the people's money. Why don't we build a regional location in Banga, for example? And Banga focuses on southeastern Bon County and northern Bon County. There's a concentration. Obviously, road network is required. So I think the healthcare center has to be centralized in a way that caters to the majority of our population, not these scattered clinics that were done under Ellen Johnson's administration.
Thank you. Anyone else chiming in, please? Realistically, like Dualu said, I think that sounds very, very feasible. It's not a pie in the sky. We're not trying to open up the Johns Hopkins Medical Hospital. We're not trying to open up an orthopedic surgery unit, right? Those are just, very basic, straightforward stuff. Anything from the healthcare space? Anyone else? Because I do have something on this list, which is the education space that we're in dire situation, but we do have to look at that and say, hey, gentlemen, is there something here that we can do? Low hanging fruit, guys. Really come out the gates. 2024. What is it that we can?
Another thing, seeing these guys are still trying to come in. Another thing that I remember, I don't think it's being done out of Rwanda. I think in Nigeria. I was reading this article about somewhere. What they do is they get these young doctors fresh out of medical school, and the medical school in Liberia, LU Medical School. I forget the name. Decolleté, right? I believe that's what it's called. They will take these young doctors.
AM Dogliati.
Yeah, thank you so much. And what they do is they take these young doctors, and you have to spend your first 3 years. It's almost like an internship, so to speak. And they do it regionally. You will spend this so-called location, like a traveling nurse type of thing. So the doctors will go ahead. And Rwanda has this drone program where there's a doctor stationed in Banga, and then he can perform certain medical procedure as far as any interior in Banga, in Bon County. But he's doing it through drone programs. So we have to utilize the technology. And I think a lot of times, everything is too concentrated in Monrovia. And I understand the reason why people don't want to leave. But until you be able to work in Monrovia, you have to pay your dues in the hinterland. There must be I'm talking about every profession, from teaching profession to the medical field, to whatever field, you have to pay some due in the hinterland. And I think that's something we're not doing. Like, for instance, Nigeria has the service program for every college graduate. You have to spend 2 or 3 years in the interior teaching our local schools, because most of the schools in Riverside, for example, I love to mention Riverside because, I have a soft spot for this location. And there is no teachers there. Nothing. Sano, Grand G, you don't have the proper teachers. So if somebody's graduating from LU that we pay for, spend 2 years out there, a part of your national service or some faction. Larry, I don't know if you got something to jump in on this.
No, so you see, this is one thing that's kind of near and dear to my heart, because I firmly believe that it's through education that you can develop a nation, right? And this was the thing that I mentioned, and I'm not going to go down that path, but just wanted to repeat what I said on social media before some of the mouthpieces of the ruling government got all carried away. Before this government came in, the percentage of the budget that was spent on education was a little over 8%. It's on the Ministry of Finance website. It's on the World Bank's website. It's all over the place. Currently, as of 2022, the percentage of the budget that is spent towards education has fallen. In 2018, 2019, it went up slightly, but in 2020, it came down and it has fallen. You can't develop a nation if you're not investing in the minds and in education. It's not going to happen. I've never seen it happen anywhere. Because even today, with all of the The Philippines doesn't have a ton of resources. But when you call a bank today, the help center, or you call like the customer support, you more than likely will talk to someone in the Philippines. But you have to educate the people. And that's why I said, look at Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone looks like they're heading in the right direction because Madabio is allocating over 30% of his budget to education. The ECOWAS states, they put out an agreement that each country should allocate a certain amount towards education. You're not going to go anywhere if you're not educating your people. This is why when you look at Singapore, that's why everybody is rushing out to Singapore to see what it is that they did well. Because Singapore invested a ton of money in education.
Yeah.
So we are putting way too much money into paying lawmaker salaries, into them driving fancy cars. The president put a ton of money into his budget to fly private jets. Look, I sent an email to the company that he rents the jets from, so I know how much he is spending. They responded to my email and said, well, this is how much it costs on an hourly basis. He flies those Dassault Falcon, he flies those Lear jets. He's paying a ton of money. It's between $4,550 to $5,000 an hour, depending on how many people are traveling with him. Why are we spending so much money on the president's travel? Look at Obrador, the president of Mexico. If you're lucky, you might catch him in the back with the rest of the passengers on a commercial flight. He's not spending that kind of money. He got rid of the presidential jet.
Correct.
We got to put money in education. And you know what we need to do? We need to start now with early childhood education and then develop that throughout the system. Because all these students who graduated from the University of Liberia, they don't have any jobs to go to. But the low-hanging fruit is you can start, remember that globalization, the US, if you look around the US, you don't see a lot of factory jobs because a lot of those technical jobs and factory jobs have gone over to Asia. Now, because manufacturers are looking for cheaper places, so for cheaper labor, they are sending some of those jobs to sub-Saharan Africa in places like Lesotho and other places, Rwanda, Kenya, Botswana. If you sometimes check your clothes, you will see your clothes are being manufactured or being made in Botswana.
That's right.
The jobs are moving out there. We're not doing that stuff in Liberia, and we need to be doing that in Liberia. So you need vision. Education is the key. That was what I was trying to get across. And then some people got carried away and wanted to come and sell themselves, and it just went off the tangent. But that's what it is. Put money in education.
Is there a space with the internet? Are there opportunities, small, minor opportunities in the with the internet that we're not optimizing, that we can look at it and say, hey, this is something we can do?
Let me give you a real world operation. We had a cable. I believe the cable got into Liberia, if I'm not mistaken, around 2010. The high-speed internet cable along the coast of Liberia. So the cable is literally in Liberia's waters, right? So in 2008, I worked for this company. They call Unprocessed Technology, and they were moving a call center. They were trying to move a call center to another location. So in our meeting that day, I mentioned Liberia, right? Just out of the blue, because I'm looking for an English-speaking country. We have a relatively high number of college graduates in the country, even though we still have a lot of work to do. And so I mentioned Liberia. I'm like, listen, because we were on our way to Calcutta, India, and they were moving the call centers. Obviously, it's in one place to go. It's cheaper operation. We had 3 call centers here in New England. We had a call center out of Fall River, Massachusetts. We have one in Maine. We have one in New Hampshire. It was costing us, because I was actually running this number, it was costing us $15 million a month to run this operation here. So management made a decision to move the call centers to Calcutta, India. Now, when I mentioned Liberia, the first thing was, like my boy JTR and Jack DeRoe just said, there is no infrastructure. The first thing that came out of the mouth, there is no infrastructure. And so there's no one can even think about Liberia. We might even consider Ghana or Nigeria if that's the case, because obviously English speaking was the primary thing. And they have better capacity in terms of the internet capacity. But eventually we moved the operations to Calcutta, India. Every single person we put in that call center was college educated, as opposed to the US that were only high school graduates. And we cut our monthly expense to $3 million per month, as opposed to the $50 million we're paying in the US. But I'm saying this to say, if we want to, like Larry just said, if we want to make significant change in Liberia, like Nelson Mandela said, it has to be done through education. if we're not significantly putting money into education where we can find a way to transform the society, it's not going to work. Look, the internet cable has been sitting off Liberia's coast for almost 10 years or a little over 10 years. It has not been utilized. So how do you expect a responsible company to bring a call center to Liberia? So for instance, if they brought a call center to Liberia, you can pay the college graduate $300-400 a month. This is a substantial amount of money in our environment. But guess what? This call center, we had approximately, I think it was like 312 people out of New England that we had. When we moved the call center to Calcutta, India, we ended up getting almost 1,100 people, all college educated, but less than a third of what we were paying here. So we're going to do the same thing in Liberia, and I just want to make that.
Thank you very much. So I mean, because we're simply asking ourselves the question with what we have, the limited resources we've looked at governance, we've established that that's something very critical. Another piece that Larry brought up that I was kind of shocked with that number was how much of the budget actually goes to education, right? And it seems as if now I understand fully why there's NGO presence so much, right? Because we're relying on the NGO to pick up that heavy lifting. And I think that might be detrimental to us in the long run. Another hot topic is, if we can't do some of these things, what about agriculture? Is there a space in agriculture where we can look and increase certain productions on certain things? We have a lot of rain. Is there anything we can really do in the region to provide? We have in the region, we have a high Islamic population. They consume a lot of meat. They consume a lot of cattle, beef, and so forth. Are we overlooking that? Is there anything small in that space?
Look, before Larry comes here, I want to say this. We talk about Botswana every single day. One of the major exports is beef. Look, let me tell you something. Every time we talk about mechanized farming, and Liberian want to jump over a major stage of the agricultural process. Look, I was fortunate to visit Laos, Cambodia. These places, their output in rice production or any agricultural product is not heavily mechanized. They have these little tractors. You don't have to go these giant farming equipment you will find in Idaho or most of Europe. They have these basic things. The only thing is detreeing, whatever that word is, to remove the trees to open the land. They're using basic tractors. They're using these bolts to pull these wheels. And their production, in fact, some of our rice that we eat in Liberia are coming from these Southeastern Asian locations. And they're not heavily mechanized. So it's not about mechanized farming. This is one of the low-hanging fruits we're talking about. But the thing is, look, a $50 million allocation into the budget and proper leadership. I'm talking about people with expertise in the agricultural sector. And you really demand results from them. And you really monitor the process. In 3 to 5 years, we can become food self-sufficient in the country. This is not a hard thing to do. Everything is available in Liberia. But I think this is a refusal on the part of our leadership to do what they're supposed to do to get the results that's really going to transform the location. I don't know the reasoning behind it. I don't know why, but it baffles me every single time because this is a simple thing we can do.
And one of the issues we run into in Liberia, over here in the U.S., for example, I'm sorry, Gabriel, I'll be real quick.
No, go ahead. I'm listening in.
You cannot have a business or a company within a sector where you're a minister. So you can't have the education minister running a school or the agriculture minister running a farm. In fact, there's a law on the books in the U.S., right? In the U.S. Code where that cannot happen. But we see that happening in Liberia, and that's why sometimes the regulations for certain things in Liberia is difficult, and we see some of the issues in agriculture. But you need to be able to feed yourself so you can stop the capital flight to buy everything that you need to eat. So that's important. The low-hanging fruits in terms of within a couple of sectors real quick is, and this covers not just agriculture, but also in manufacturing, like what Mitchell is saying over here. Liberia just qualified again for AGOA, right? The African Growth and Opportunity Act. Correct. So Companies are interested in doing business in Liberia because when they export that thing out of Liberia, they don't have to pay the kind of high tariffs that other countries would have to pay. So Liberia qualified for AGOA, but we're not taking advantage of it. Madam didn't do a good job of taking advantage of it. And the current administration is not doing a good job of taking advantage of it. You know why? Because we don't put people in position, we don't have a meritocracy where someone who knows, I know crap about agriculture, but if I'm from the same tribe or from the same family as someone in the government, they can probably put me to be agriculture minister, and I know nothing about agriculture. I know nothing about tourism. You have someone who was at one time the Minister of Information, Culture, Affairs, and Tourism, now running something at maritime. How much does he know about maritime? So we need meritocracy. Put people who have the technical skills in maritime affairs over at the maritime. It doesn't happen. Low hanging fruit, the agriculture take advantage of AGOA. This was something that Ed Royce and all these guys crafted for Liberia and African countries, but we haven't done a good job of it. The other low-hanging fruit is in the tourism sector. Punta Cana, for example, right? I just traveled to Dominican Republic. Dominican Republic has the same security threat like in Liberia. They're on a level 2 when you go to the State Department's website. But when you land at that airport, there are thousands of Americans, Europeans, people from Asia coming into that country despite the security threat. Why? Because they had developed the tourism sector at such a level. They are making a killing from tourism. Liberia, we're not landlocked like Central African Republic and all these other countries. We don't have really bad neighbors. These are all the things where they are considered impediments to development. We don't have bad neighbors. We're not landlocked. We have access to the ports, and we have a long coastline of beautiful beaches. When I came down to Liberia with the former chief of staff of Ruta Giuliani, this man was only interested in seeing the beaches in Liberia. He heard so much about it. And when we took him to the beach, he was saying, oh my God, we can have tourists coming in here on the yacht, fishing for kudas, doing a whole lot of stuff. But he said the problem with that is you have a lot of poverty. It would look extremely bad and they would feel insecure when you have all these poor zinc houses right here on the shoreline. In every other country, the shoreline is one of the most expensive properties in every other country. In Liberia, no, this is where we have the ghettos, right? So we're not doing a good job in terms of putting people who have expertise in certain fields, in certain areas, because we do it based on tribalism. We do it based on familiar status. We do it based on friendship. We do it based on people who get paid the most money to buy a position. That's what's hurting us. So the low-hanging fruit in the tourism is in agriculture. It's taking advantage of AGOA. Technology, we have some very smart people at the University of Liberia, but we're not taking advantage of that because we're not exposing them to programming. Let them learn Python, let them learn C, let them learn SQL, let them learn all these languages. Some of the jobs, you don't have to be in the States. You need good internet. That's all you need to have these people that are working from pretty much anywhere in the world. I talk to people around the world all the time in the work that I do. These guys, a lot of them are in India on the technical side. Why can't we do it from Liberia? We have bad internet. Google and USAID have been trying to set up this internet in Liberia for a long time. Since the internet hit Liberia from Gabon back in 2013, we haven't exploited that. It's just embarrassing. We just don't get the technical people in there to do this stuff. It's absolutely crazy.
I do agree. Yeah, go ahead. I do agree with you guys that these are low hanging fruit. I was at a policy event not too long ago. I met a lady a white lady. She runs, according to her, this is probably the best agriculture school in West Africa. There are people that come from other West African countries go there, and that is, guess what? It's in Liberia, right in Ganta. When she told me that, my mind was like, "Poof, are you serious?" She said, "Yeah." And if you go to the airport, the next time you go to Liberia, you go to the airport, the chocolate, Liberian chocolate, you see that it's made right in Ganta there, right? It was produced right in a college in Ganta, right? But the problem she's having, the same thing with the funding. She took over, ran it for 5 years. She's now trying to scale back to have a Liberian run it, but the funding, and she talks about stuff like that, right? I agree that these are all low-hanging fruits from the education, the things we can do with agriculture and tourism. The biggest part, and I always argue with people on this whenever they present their policy agenda, is where are you going to get the money? How are you going to fund it? You can come out with the most elaborate policy agenda that is most liberal, that is more, you're going to bring the most technically gifted people. Where are you going to get the money to fund it? And I always say that because in our case in Liberia, let's say you take over right now as president, you're going to meet the state coffers empty. That's a guarantee. You're going to inherit a country that is in $2.5 billion, 2.5, $2.1 billion in debt, right? That means every dollar in GDP you make, you owe 60 cents. Now you only have 40 cents to play with. So you do your math. What are you going to do with that 40 cents? You're going to inherit a failing economy. Where are you going to get the money? We talk about, hey, you can argue with me whether you're on the CDC side or whatever opposition side. You can say, hey, we already have a almost $800 billion budget. I'm going to play with that. Well, guess what? That's not true. $110 million of that is our external. It's coming from outside. That means you only have about $650 million in revenue, domestic revenue mobilization that you're collecting from there. So this whole big budget that we talk about, a third of it comes from external sources. So you're going to have to deal with that. Now, the biggest challenge, the reason why I always pose these questions to those who say, hey, I have elaborate policy and things and all of this, is your budget is a law. Guess what? The same, if you want to change that budget to cut people, the representative, the senators, they pay from $15,000 to $5,000. Guess what? You're going to have to present it to them to sign it, to say, hey, Larry, I know you are making 15,000, but I want you to sign this bill to cut your pay down to 5,000. Guess what? Do you think Larry is going to say that to cut that after he's been enjoying that for years and years? So that's the biggest challenge. So you can come in, if you're not able to convince, like persuade people to change that budget law as it is right now to what you want it to be, you will not be able to do anything. Because right now you can go there and say that you come the same budget. Those people are still taking, what is it, 80% of that on recurring expenditure, right? So that is the biggest problem. The biggest problem, as I always like to say, is where are you going to get the money? In our case, where are you going to fund this money? You can cut things here. You can plug charge. You can plug leak holes here and take people off a ghost payroll. Let's say in a higher case, you would generate $100 million. Where are you going to put it? You're going to prioritize, right? So I think we have potential, but the fundamental thing is, first, we got to change our budget law. Most importantly, two, I know we have a massive debt load that we're overlooking. We're kicking this can down the road. We don't have credit rating. I forgot to say that. So you can't say, hey, I'm going to go on the credit market to get money and change and restructure that debt. You're stuck with the IMF until you can get a credit rating to go on a global market to do something. And the IMF, you go there, you know what they can do? They put you in a straight jacket. They say, if you load left and right, I will slap your jaw. You stay in that straight jacket. Ghana been in that for years. They are still in it 17 times. So my question to all of you, where are you going to get the money? And what are you going to do? How are you going to get the money, and where are you going to put it?
Well,
Thank you. Dualu, I know you want to answer this question. I can see, so I'll let you go ahead. And Professor Larry, as you look through some of the comments, let me know which one so I can bring it up, and we'll go in that order. Go ahead, Dualu.
The issue is where we're going to get the money. I'm a firm believer that if we just fixed our current system at 30%, you can get $1 billion into that country pumping by investors. I'm talking about the structural system, the institutional system, especially our commercial courts. What we've done to us, and another thing is, and I believe this wholeheartedly, Gabriel, I don't believe the Liberian government has utilized the financial capacity of diasporans, Liberians, especially those of us in the United States, Australia, and most of Western Europe. Let me just put in the perspective for you. The average Liberian in this country, I'm being very, very conservative, takes home on average $50,000 per year. Average. I'm talking about working age Liberians. Okay. Now there are a lot of Liberians that make way more money. Exclude all your doubles. Don't put that there. I'm talking about basic. But let's just bring that number down to $40,000. The government of Liberia needs a lot of money. But here's what they don't realize. You cannot individually fix Liberia in the absence of your best and brightest minds. I am not suggesting, because people like to nitpick, that people back home are not on the best and brightest minds, because people back home do not have the opportunity to hone the skills, so they are not giving the kind of intellectual capital they need to actually advance the country. What are we doing? Look, our entire country, the average Liberian back home lives on $600 per annum. That is the per capita income in our country. Why would anybody in the Republic of Liberia, I'm not talking about expert you're bringing to produce results, tie their results to the income you're going to give them. Why would anybody in that society make more than $2,000 per month? I don't see any reason why anybody in government who is not a super expert. So, for instance, you bring XYZ to Liberia. Say, listen, we want rice production to be a certain capacity in 1 year. If you get it to the capacity, you get as much money. I'm not talking about those kind of expertise. I'm talking about everyday government employee, from the legislature to everybody else. Why do you pay anybody more than $2,000 a month? There is no reason. There's a lot of money on the table, but the money is being going to things that we don't need. Look, I was in the country. I spent the last 3 months in the country. I think I've been back almost two and a half weeks.
How are you going to convince those people to take that pay cut?
No, you don't need to convince them. You don't need to convince them. Look,
how are you going to persuade them?
No, you don't need to persuade them. Let me tell you, leadership is not a child's play thing. Kigami did not convince them. Look, when you see the policy decision, the budget originates from the presidency. They can claim they have the money. You can look, the president has so many tools. Let me give you an example. Liberia
executive order is the only way to go.
Well, you got to utilize every tools in your capacity. Okay? Liberia is dying. The people are going to support you. For the next 1 year, nobody in the country will make more than $2,000 until we get these results. When the other 1 year, you use it until you get it and let them pass a law. Look, you have to force the issue. Look, the people are dying. We cannot sit there and allow, you got guys that will come to governance, don't have a pot to pissing a year before. And the next day, this guy can afford to build a multi-million-dollar facility in the country. And he justifies this as, but the man working, where are jail the man for? All of us work in this country. We know how hard it is to make $1 million, or even to make $100,000, how hard it is. And these guys are playing around with the money of the country. The resources can come to the country. But the problem here is the commercial courts have to protect people. People have to feel that the investments are protected. Liberia is ripe for literally any kind of investment you pour into the country. But the issue is bottlenecks at the courts. There's bottlenecks with the institutions in the country to protect those people. So the money is not the tough part. The tough part is building that very institution to protect that money. And it takes leadership. It goes back to leadership.
Okay.
You know, the point that Gabriel just made.
Thank you very much. Professor Larry, we have this comment we want to
I think Larry wanted to add a statement, something.
Oh, go ahead. You can add that statement, and you can.
Yeah, just 30 seconds real quick. What Gabriel just mentioned is what I've been asking. Every time I'm on a show, on the closing argument or on any other show, this is the one question I've always been asking, and I'm with Gabriel in the same room on this part. You need money. No matter, I know money is the root of all evil. If you want to go biblical on me, that's fine. But you need money to grow your country. You have to borrow money. Out of the past 55 years or so, there's only been one instance where the U.S. had a balanced budget. But other than that, the U.S. have always borrowed money. And they borrow money several ways, right? They borrow money by issuing bonds. U.S. Treasury issued bonds. We know the CBL tried that, but the people who buy CBL bonds or bills or who subscribe to the CBL, it's mainly banks, not the general population. Here in the U.S., the general population can even way back when I first started working with JP Morgan, if you wanted to actually purchase a U.S. Treasury bond, you had to go to a broker dealer, right, or a bank or someone to be able to purchase it. But now you can go onto something like a Treasury Direct. If you want a Treasury Direct, you as an individual can lend money to the U.S. government by investing in U.S. treasuries. So here's the thing. Liberia doesn't have credit rating, like what Gabriel just mentioned. And when we had Kamara here last week, I asked him, did you guys ever do any work in the previous administration to fix Liberia's sovereign debt rating? It's because we don't have credit rating. That's why these guys came in and they ran and tried to do a deal with a fake company in Singapore called Eton, because they need to borrow money for all this. Granted, they would have stolen a good portion of that money, but that's another story. But still, you got to borrow money to be able to do all the things you want to do, build the roads, the school, and all of that stuff. But we have a problem. We don't have credit rating. So it's difficult to borrow money if you don't have credit rating. And Kamara said they tried fixing the credit rating, but somewhere the process stopped. Out of the ECOWAS countries, I think maybe only 4 or 5 has credit ratings, and Ghana is one of them. Yeah. But as you start borrowing money, like what happened to Ghana, you got to pay close attention, because Ghana's in a debt crisis now. They borrow money, but they didn't put that money towards development. And now they're not able to make debt payments. So we have to be able to borrow the money, but we can't put the money to white elephant projects like building road only down in the southeast when it's not going to lead to anything. We need to be able to put that money to something productive, whether it's farming, whether it's tourism, whether it's building roads that we did a feasibility study on. You have to be able to do that stuff. Yeah. We have to fix the credit rating. And I know that's another question you're going to pop up, but because I know we're running out of time, I'll touch on it real quick. But you also need remittances from the diaspora. And I think William, and I know I've heard my man, Dualu, and I love that, Dualu for the people. And I know my man Dualu has spoken about
it. Is a huge advocate of that.
I heard him say that, Dualu for the people, I love it. But you need to be able to tap into the diaspora. I don't know if William's talked about it, my man Gabriel's talked about it. Remittances is huge. Take a look at the data on remittances. It has been going down slowly, but we need a lot of remittances. But you need to be able to tap the wealth of the diaspora. But the diaspora is not going to invest in Liberia right now because they don't trust the administration. Yeah. So you have to be able to build trust. But let me not take up any more time. And I know Eku talked about the agriculture sector in the 70s. That is so important. Some of the things that we did back then, we're not able to replicate it. The war took away a lot of that stuff. But he's right. Not just to reinvent the wheel. Let's look at what actually worked and see if we can rebuild on that. But we haven't been successful at doing that yet. So I'm not sure where we go from there.
I agree.
Thank you.
I agree. And I want to add this point very quickly before you read this stuff. Diaspora Liberians, on average, make $40,000. That's about $40 billion every single year. Minimally, that's what we take home. A substantial amount of money, like Larry said, we have to find a way to tap into that, because the Ethiopians are doing it, the Eritreans are doing this, the government have a program, even the Cape Verdeans are doing something similar. They're having the diaspora citizens pay taxes, and the taxes go through direct capital investment into the country. So there are so many things we can do.
Thank you.
Okay, so
Samuel says you don't necessarily. Go ahead, Gabe.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to read the comments, but you can read it. That's
okay. You don't necessarily need agency ministry heads in place who are experts in what the agency or ministry does. I believe this was speaking to some of the points. He gave you a bitter ball, Professor Larry. He said, hey, some of those guys, you need civil servants who are experts. Appointees come and go. Civil servants are forever. So I guess there's a yin and a yang. On one end, it's like, you want to make sure that your core is always solid and it doesn't change all the time.
Yep, that's it.
I agree with that to a certain extent, but I vehemently disagree that the person in, who's calling the shots shouldn't understand or shouldn't be an expert in that field. Let me tell you why. I don't want the head of the Ministry of Health to be clueless when it comes to health delivery.
I agree.
I don't want the Ministry of Health to be someone who's working tourism. It doesn't make no sense, because they wouldn't know or they wouldn't accept the advice from the low-level civil servants because they haven't lived a life in that field. I don't want the head of the Ministry of Lands and Mines to be someone who has no clue about geological studies or anything of that sort. It's extremely dangerous. You don't want the head of the Robert International Airport to have no idea about aviation. The person probably came from the fisheries, because you need to be able to speak the language that the civil servants experts are speaking to you, and you need to be able to understand that language. Because if you don't understand it, it will seem kind of foreign to you, and you would fall for anything. That's why I disagree with you, Sam. I agree with you on some other comments.
And just to add to that,
go ahead, Dualu.
Just to add to that, how do you develop the policy decisions to improve that agency if you're not abreast with the lingo, et cetera, et cetera? Now, I may understand a little bit what Mr. Wolo is saying as well, but Mr. Wolo, the thing is, the head is not just somebody who sits there and signs document. He actually delegates based on the understanding of the operations of that entity. So it goes beyond. I mean, you put him in there, you try him in too. It's way beyond that. And I see your point, but it's way beyond that.
What I was going to say was that we did have an expert in aviation, expert in flying away with the money. And for some reason,
you are crazy.
The only reason why they were caught was because of the road. They weren't expert in how to flee on the road. So,
I see.
That was a good jab.
Right. So, we're coming up. We want to be respectful of everybody's time. We want to keep the show to an hour and 30 minutes. So I'll put up another comment, and you can either choose to, comment on that. But I want you to leave us with maybe 3 things that in your preview, despite all the imperfections that are there, challenges, give us 3 things that in 2024 that you're like, hey, we just can't miss this. These are just gimmies.
Oh, wow. Who is this? Oh, I can't say Mitchell. He said, getting credit rating. Getting credit rating.
So it says, JTR Mitchell, Gabriel, getting credit rating means little if your rating is crap and the resulting borrowing term is onerous. Woo. My man, This guy is trying to get a job at your bank, my man.
He's speaking heavy book here. But let me respond to him. Maybe the other guys can chime in. I do agree with him in terms of, if in our case, if you do get a credit rating, it won't be like a B or C plus stable. It will be at a junk status until you start doing what you need to do, which is pay your debt on time, continuing to fix your infrastructure. Now, once you continue to do that, that's when your the score will actually improve. But one of the most important things that people say, I know Larry alluded to Boama being on the show, and he said they were doing something with their credit rating. Credit rating is not just something where you can just go craft your policy and say, hey, this is what I think I'm going to do. Come give me a credit rating. No, it means that you have a solid financial system that is fluid, that investors can put money in and they know that money is secure. They know that, in our case, currently right now, we have one of the things that I think that keep people, we have a fixed exchange rate, right? So nobody want to bring their money in your country where they know there's a fixed exchange rate, because they don't have control over the volatility. Anybody can just come in and change it anytime, and boom, you could lose $50 million just by somebody changing the exchange rate. So yes, you do, when you do get a credit rating, it will become junk, right? But at least you're starting from somewhere. You start from somewhere. You start paying your bill on time. You start building your financial institution, and the one that investors can trust. Where if I want, like Larry said before, if the central bank issue bonds, I can be over here, buy a bond, and know that the coupon payment, that means the interest payment, it can go into my account. I don't have to do anything. Like fluid like that, they will start trusting your system. But most importantly is the government being able to pay its debt on time, consistently, and that's how you improve it. So when you do get it in the medium term, it will become junk, but you can build it from a junk status to a C plus, BB plus, to a good status, what we call good credit rating, a pass grade credit rating, to that level. So
for me, Gabriel, I slightly disagree with you. On the credit rating thing, I think any country who has not attained, let's say, middle income status, where they should not even apply for credit rating because they're not going to be able to manage it. This got so many examples from the Eastern European blocks, from South America. We can see the case in Ghana. Most of the guys that got credit rating was extremely onerous, like that Jack just said. The issue here is if you get credit rating and your basic internal infrastructure is not at the level to be able to maintain that so-called rating, you're going to destroy. So I don't think any country should apply for credit rating unless you get your standards to at least middle income status. That's just my feel for me, especially Liberia being a very irresponsible country. Even we apply for it, then we able to take loan from somewhere. The next thing you know, we're buying bigger vehicles instead of the $80,000 vehicles. Every minister now wants $300,000 vehicle.
I would say, let me just I would say you don't have to. It's like trying to become something, and you say the only way I would do that is if I am perfect. No, you don't need to get to a middle income state. Those are the private matter of fact, those are some of the things that will get you to a middle income state. Because when you now here's the downside to what you're saying, right? If you do get a credit rating at our stage, let's say we were able to put things in order, we get to the, let's say, a junk started, like a, C or whatever it is. Let's say C, okay, which is the lowest. The premium people are going to pay, the cost of capital people are going to pay for our debt, meaning that if we issue debt to anybody, the interest rate they will charge us for giving us that money, it will be high because our credit rating, which is okay. Now, I agree with you that if you don't have the right people in place to be able to manage that thing, and you can take money, but you also you cannot forego what we call the domestic revenue mobilization, because you need to grow your revenue to be able to pay that debt. If you don't have the right people in place, they can blow up that debt and it could become a problem. We have it with Puerto Rico, right? We have it with I forgot another country that took out $2 billion in debt. That debt was done by JP Morgan, and up to now they're still paying that because they didn't have the right people in place. But before you do that, you got to I agree with you, you got to have the right people in place, but you don't have to wait to get to a middle income state to do that. Matter of fact, those are the things that when you lay out in the foundation will be able to get you to a middle income state. Yeah, but okay. I agree with you on that part. Right.
Thank you. Dualu, top 3 low-hanging fruits 2024 we gotta hit the nail on the head with in 2024 to be able to kind of just get better. What are your top 3?
For me, in the fishery industry, for me, I'm not going to explain much because I wrote a whole paper on this issue. The fishery industry is one of them. I believe we even if it's $10 million into fishing, you have boats out here. Especially here in New England, you can get an entire fishing boat for $500,000. So you can bring 6-7 fishing boats that can have, and you have a locations like Greenville, Buchanan, and maybe Hopper. You build these hubs. You got to include Mozzarella as well. You build these hubs for the fishing boats to upload. $5 million, we can get anywhere from 10 to 20 fishing boats. Those alone can have close to 50,000 direct and indirect jobs in Liberia in no time. That's my number 1, the fishing industry. Number 2, look, cassava exportation out of the world. The Chinese are heavily buying literally all the cassavas out of the world for the pig feedings. The Nigerians are shipping over $1 billion worth of cassava every single year out of the country. We have the land space for it. We have cassava in Liberia that can grow within 3 to 6 months. That means if somebody can clear a 3-acre, 4-acre anywhere in the country and they plant cassava, within the span of 3 to 4 months, a 3-acre farm can net you anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000 just by selling this cassava. The government can have a consolidation location and have this cassava shipped out of the country. Another thing that I really consider is we have to find a way to subsidize some of these small farmers across the country. The government can buy these in bulk and have a redistribution center across the country. Those 3 things I'm giving you can generate north of 150,000 jobs in the span of 5 years. I'll give it back to you guys.
Thank you very much. Larry, I mean, the guy gave you 3, he gave you some 3 serious punches right there on that one. Those are some, I mean, that is just what, within maybe 2 months cash flowing or less. Dualu goes straight to the point. Professor Larry, you, top 3?
So everything that I say will rest on one major thing. No, and this is very important. You need to strengthen the rule of law. Without the rule of law, you're wasting your time. You need a strong, unbiased judicial system. If you look at a lot of the issues in Liberia right now, the judicial system is extremely weak under Musadin, extremely weak. In fact, when you look at the US government website, when Ambassador McCarthy gave his final news conference, if you take a look at the website, look at that news conference, the transcript from July the 11th, he said he was surprised that after the US put all of these people on the sanctions list, that no one in Liberia approached the US to see what could be possibly done. And he said the Department of Treasury did a lot of investigation and said these people were actually doing a lot of this illegal stuff. But he said no one approached the United States to see what can be done about it. So low-hanging fruit, well, let's talk about it. So if you're not fixing the judicial system, everything I'm going to talk about is just going to be a waste of our time, right? What you need to do in terms of low-hanging fruit, tap into the wealth that you find in the diaspora because you need money. But in order to encourage the diaspora to come to Liberia, Liberia is currently ranked 175 out of 190 in terms of doing business. You have a very convoluted business climate. And I think I saw someone mention something about Liberians interested in investing back home. You can't do it because they give you the runaround when you try to do that. It's ranked 175 out of 190. You have to improve the investment climate, which you're not having. So you need a strong judicial system. You need to tap into the Liberians here in the diaspora to be able to, tap into that wealth. But again, because I have that banking background, you have to improve the financial sector to be able to borrow money, to be able to lend it to people who are interested in investing it so they can create jobs. Because in the US, it's the small businesses that create the jobs that you see happening over here in the US. So you need to be able to make that happen. So there's so many low-hanging fruits. I mean, you talk about tourism, you still need to improve the infrastructure and the healthcare sector for tourism, like what Gabriel mentioned earlier. At one time, there was about 178 hospitals and clinics in Liberia. 12 of them were actually run by NGOs. The healthcare sector in Liberia is extremely weak. Tourists come over there, they get hurt. It can be completely discouraging for other tourists to come to that country. Completely discouraging if they don't get the kind of health and medical treatment. Not everybody can be, on a medical evacuation out of the country. So there's so many opportunities in the country, but it requires strong leadership. And that's what 2023 is going to determine. Are we going to go with strong leadership, or are we going to go back to the kleptocracy? So, always love having chats. I see the comments in here. They are very engaging. We can go on reading comments and discussing it, and we'll be here all night. I always love to be here always love to be on a platform with Dualu and the people. I had to say that one more time. But I'll swing it back to you guys.
Thank you. So, what I'm getting at some very high level, I think one of the top of the list is judicial, right? Really being able to have a strong, solid governance. The other thing that I look at from Dualu is leadership. That it's very, very critical. And then lastly, it's low-hanging business innovation that is able to kind of flourish. So I think those are the space that we're looking at in 2024 to see how they can get done. And if it gets done, I think we're going to be smooth sailing. Well, not smooth sailing, but at least we see some light at the end of the tunnel. So that's great. Gabriel, anything?
No, I think they've said it all. I think Larry's the things I would think about. Larry said them. Recapitalize the bank, make it easy for people to register the business, and have a good rule of law. You make those three things. I think if you come in first day, you make those three things a priority. Domestic businesses will start forming. People from the diaspora will trust their banking system, and you will have enough capital there for people to be starting businesses. So, and you have a good rule of law. It makes it easy for investors to come in and trust your country to bring money in. Even not just investors, people from the diaspora that want to go, invest in Liberia, Liberian that want to go invest in Liberia. So I think Larry said all of those three. So I think
Thank you.
if I were to go, those will be my three as well. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much to Gabriel, Professor Larry, Dualu, Alex, guys, you joining this conversation, looking at things from a very simplistic, rubber hits the road approach. We cover so much. And so once again, to our viewers, thank you for tuning in, joining us. Please share this show and everything when you can. We may have a whole bunch of top threes, but remember this. We are all Liberians, and we are smart, we're educated, and we should promote Liberia, but in the right way, in the sound way. And with that being said, we want to thank you. And remember to tune in to us, especially tomorrow. We have a beautiful show coming up with the folks. So please tune in and stay focused on Liberia. Thank you.
We are Liberians. Liberia is our